Welcome back, everyone. In the last video, then we talked about retrieval and some different types of retrieval and what can help, what certain types of memories are more easily retrieved than others. But now we're going to talk about something called matching conditions. And so with matching conditions, then it says that retrieval can be increased by matching the conditions at retrieval to the conditions that existed at encoding. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video, is different types of matching conditions. So there's three specific ways that we can achieve matching. The first one is encoding specificity. The second one is state-dependent learning. And finally, transfer-appropriate processing. So again, all of these are different ways that will increase our retrieval of a memory by matching the conditions at retrieval to the conditions at encoding. So let's get into these three different specific ways. The first one is encoding specificity. So here, this is that we learn information together with its context. Okay, so this is pretty much just saying that the context where you learn something is important. So for example, if you study underwater, then when you go to test, if you test underwater versus on land, you're going to do better underwater because that's where you studied. Now the same thing, if you study on land and are tested on land, you're going to do pretty well. But if you study on land and test underwater, you're not going to do as well. Because the context of where you studied or where you learned something is important. So remember, when we're studying, that's where we're encoding information. And then when we test, we're retrieving. So the same environment that you are studying in, the environment that you're encoding information in, you want to be in the same environment when you're testing. So this is just another example, kind of the same thing, but with a newer study from the 98 that looked at the studying conditions and recall in the context of encoding specificity. So instead of crazy example of being underwater or on land, this is something that's more acceptable, something that happens when we study, is whether you study with noise. So that could be music playing in the background, that could be friends talking, your dog barking, anything like that, or studying in quietness, in a nice silent environment. Well then, when you're tested, if you study with noise and you're able to take the test when there's also noise, you tend to do quite well. If you study with noise and then are tested in a quiet environment, you'll do okay, but you won't do nearly as well as when there was noise. Now, if you study in quiet and you're tested in quiet, you're going to do great. But if you study in quiet and then you're tested in noise, you're actually going to do worse, because you're not used to having that distraction, that noise going on. So really what this is saying is, if you're going to take a test in complete silence, you should study in complete silence. If you're going to take a test where you know that there'll be some noise, then you should study with some noise as well, so that you get used to that distraction. And even if there ends up not being noise, you'll do better studying with noise and testing in the quiet than if you studied in quiet and there's no noise. Okay? So you can also think about this as if you take a test for a class, then you want to try to sit in the same spot as you did during the lectures, because that will allow you to be in about the same context, the same location as where you encoded the information. So taking a test in the same place as where you study. So if you guys are watching these videos or studying in your kitchen then you want to take the test in your kitchen to do best. You don't want to suddenly move to a new place, because that new place can actually distract you and inhibit you from recalling all that information. Now, the second of the matching conditions is state-dependent learning. And this is learning associated with a particular internal state. So, for example, if you're buzzed on caffeine when you're studying, then you should make sure you are at the same level of caffeine buzz when you take the test. Okay? There's also a non-drug examples as well, so that could be your mood or level of tiredness. So if you're really sad when you're studying, you should be sad when you test then, because you'll actually do better than if you were happy. I would suggest trying to be happy at all times. I know that's very difficult. I struggle with that. But, that's one thing that can help you. Also, level of tiredness. If you sleep really well every night when you study, then you want to try to get a really good night's sleep before a test. Because if you're too tired, then you're actually not going to be able to recall as much because you were well rested when you studied. Now, if you're, sleep deprived at all when you study, then you should actually be sleep deprived when you take the test as well. It's weird, but it's true. Now, this is an internal state. I don't know if you guys watch, there was a TV show I watched, what was it? Grace and Frankie on Netflix. And Grace would, every time she was studying for her driver's test, then she was drinking alcohol. And then she'd go and take the test, and she'd do awful because she was sober. So the thing was, when she was tested when she was drunk, because that's where she studied, then she did great. Of course, you can't take a driver's test while drunk, so obviously that didn't work out well. So what she had to do was she had to start studying all over again while sober. So again, whatever your internal state is, whether that's talking about caffeine, weed, alcohol, or your mood, level of tiredness, you want that to be the same when you're studying as it is when you're taking a test. So here's a fun graph that's just showing exactly what I said. So if you're sad when you study and you're sad when you take your test, you're going to do great. Whereas if you're sad when you study and you're happy when you take your test, you're going to do bad, which is kind of ironic because it's going to make you sad. So either stay sad or stay happy. Okay? So that's state-dependent learning. Now the final one of these matching conditions would be transfer-appropriate processing. So this would be when your memory performance is better if the type of task at encoding matches the type of task at retrieval. So here, if during encoding, you're doing a meaning task, but then retrieval is a rhyming recognition task, you're not going to do as well as when encoding, you do a rhyming task, and then retrieval is a rhyming recognition task. So an example here is when you're making maybe some numeric devices or something, if you create a fun naming rhyming task, then that will really help you if you know that your test is going to be on rhyming. Now, if you know your test is going to be a meaning type task, so like in this class, your exam is going to be about the meaning of something, then you should encode using a meaning task. Okay? So you want your study style or your encoding style to match the retrieval style, the testing style. And that's what transfer appropriate processing is. So those are the 3 matching conditions. So that's it for this video, and then there'll be one more video for chapter 7 where we talk about forgetting.